Welcome to Panels and Borders. I'm Dominic. So there's lots of Star Trek news floating around here lately because Discovery has premiered. It's season 2. So after looking through some of the articles, this one kind of caught my attention, so I thought I'd make a video about it. So this article is by Digital Spy. Star Trek boss says new spin-offs will learn from Deep Space Nine and Voyager mistakes. I want to make sure that each show is different and unique proposition. Star Trek is getting a number of new spin-off series over the next couple of years, but boss Alex Kurtzman has said that they will all feel fresh in different ways. Comparisons have been raised to the late 90s when Deep Space Nine and Voyager spin-offs led to fatigue of the franchise. But the series centered on Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, and Philippa Georgiou, Michelle Yeoh, coming in addition to an animated spin-off Lower Decks and short Trek mini-episodes. Kurtzman said on Variety's TV Take podcast that the franchise has learned from its previous mistakes. What we're planning on is, I want to make sure that each show is a different and unique proposition, he said. I think that Deep Space Nine and Voyager got into a tricky spot where people were starting to feel like I can't tell the difference between the shows, even though they were very different. Our job is to make sure that every time you get a new Star Trek show, it feels like a very different prospect from any other Trek show that exists. In the same way, the world of Marvel or in the world of Pixar, you have multiple stories coexisting and yet each one feels different. While there is kind of an assumption that an understanding of what the brand identity of what that thing is. Every time you go to a Marvel movie, you kind of know what you're going to get. But one could be Ragnarok, and one could be Black Panther, and one could be Iron Man. All of those have very, very different feel, but the premium is always on the storytelling. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute, this article, and he says he's learning from the mistakes that they made in the past with the 90s Star Trek, where you had all these different series out and they all looked alike and all sounded alike, so people couldn't tell them apart. Okay, he's right. No, 90s Trek, you look at them, they're all shot the same way, lit the same way, and if you're not really a big Star Trek fan, maybe you can get them confused, but they only look alike as far as how they're shot and lit and all that, but when actual storylines and stuff comes about, they're actually quite a bit different. So you had the Next Generation that came out, and that was a huge hit. And so it was a big deal because there was the whole idea. See, people don't appreciate what kind of an impact Next Generation had, because the people have grown up with so much Trek. I grew up in a time, all this Trek that you see now, I grew up in a time when there was none of it. Like when I was a kid, you had the original series, and the first movie I saw in theaters that was a Star Trek film was Star Trek 3 Search for Spock. So I remember a time when you had just the original series and those first 3 Star Trek movies, and that was it for Star Trek. And the idea of a whole new crew and a whole new Enterprise and all that was totally alien. There was no concept of it. And because they did try to make another Star Trek series, but instead they went on to make the motion picture. Now, not a lot of people at the time, that wasn't common knowledge at the time, because you didn't have internet and all that back then. So you just had those 3 first movies and the original series, and that was it. So when Next Generation came on the air, that was a big deal. A whole new, brand new Star Trek series that had a brand new crew and a brand new Enterprise. That was something that no one said it would take. You couldn't replace. It was unheard of. It said you couldn't replace the original series. You only had one Trek, and that was it. And basically, it came out, and it was a big, huge hit, and it basically captured lightning in a bottle twice. You can capture lightning in a bottle sometimes. Some very, very rare you can capture it twice, but you can almost never capture it a third time. And then Deep Space Nine come out. Now, still kind of a cool idea. Okay, well, now this is going to be on a space station. It's not going to be, so it was very interesting. I remember being very intrigued, but not quite as the same way it was when I heard about Next Generation. But still, I started watching it. And then Voyager came out, and I was less excited. Okay, well, now the idea of a Star Trek spinoff is not interesting anymore, because you already got 2 of them. And now this is your 3rd one. And then, so even less so when Enterprise comes out. Now you got a 4th spinoff, and so on. And then you had all these movies. But here's what killed Star Trek in the 90s. I mean, yes, you had a lot of series, but here's basically what killed it. 2 things killed it, in my opinion. And now it's easy to look back with rose-colored glasses on because we got Discovery and talk about how great Star Trek was back in the day. But I remember back in the 90s, the two things I think, in my opinion, that killed Star Trek was the quantity of Trek went up, but quality of writing for Trek went down. And that is eventually what just killed it off. Because Next Generation was extremely well written, and Deep Space Nine was pretty well written, and Voyager comes along, and now it's not quite as well written. They don't really know what to do with this show. It's not quite as good. There's a lot of boring episodes on Voyager. They do have some really good episodes here and there, but they got a lot of boring ones that you got to sit through. And then Star Trek Enterprise, same thing. They had a lot of boring episodes. Same thing. They didn't really know how to tackle this as a prequel. And so it suffered some of the same problems that Discovery has now with the technology. And like I always thought, the Enterprise should have looked a little bit too advanced for the time period it was set in. Like it should have looked more like a Daedalus class starship, with like instead of a disc or a saucer section would have a sphere to make it look more primitive. If anyone here listening knows a lot about Star Trek, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that the Enterprise should look more like a Daedalus class in the Star Trek Enterprise series. So, but then the quality of the writing for Enterprise went down even further, and then the movies really, I think, really hurt the brand of Star Trek in the 90s with the Next Gen films. Because when that Star Trek Generations came out, that was not well received. Star Trek fans did not like that movie. Then they kind of had to make a course correction, and they went with First Contact. That was a big hit. That one was well received. That was the one big hit they got. And then they came out with Insurrection, and that wasn't very well received. And then finally it ended with Star Trek, the last Star Trek one there in 2002. That came out, and I can't even... Star Trek Nemesis. Almost forgot the name of it there. So it was all... So you had these 4 movies coming out in conjunction with these series. So you had more Trek than you ever had before, but the writing quality was going down and quantity was going up. So they're doing the same thing with Discovery right now. They're not learning. They're doing the exact same thing, because right out the gate, Discovery's writing is down. The quality of the writing is down. And now they want to push out more Trek series. What is the writing going to be like on these other shows? All the ideas don't sound very good. Like the animated Star Trek Lower Decks is going to be more of a comedic thing, like that, like the Rick and Morty style thing. Like that sounds stupid. And the Georgiou Phillips show, that they're the Mirror Universe version of her is getting her own show at Section 31, and they're just totally lost and don't know what they're doing. They're just throwing. And I would just forget about any of these spin-offs. Get Star Trek Discovery straightened out first. Fix that show first. But they're not fixing it. They're just doubling down on what's not working. And the whole thing of making the whole series about Burnham, that's not working. That's killing the show. That's not going to work, and they're continuing to do it. And that's the biggest problem with the show, is the character of Burnham. They got to make it more of an ensemble show like the other Star Trek series were in the past, and kind of push Burnham a little bit more back in the background. And have it explore the other characters, but they're not doing. So I think that he's not learning. He's repeating the same mistakes that they did back in the 90s, because that's what killed Star Trek in the 90s and the early 2000s was they just cranked up the quantity, but the writing quality went down. So quantity went up, quality went down. And the same thing is going to happen with this Star Trek. You know, if they do that, it's going to be the same thing. The writing right out the gate's already gone down. And if they start with quantity and the writing's gone down, they're just going to do the same thing. So it's actually doing the exact same thing, in my opinion. So that's my opinion of this article. So that's all I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. Thank you to all of my subscribers, and thank you for watching this video. And if you're new to the channel, like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to hit the bell icon for notification when new videos are uploaded.